On this episode of Locked On Canadiens, will Filip Zadina fill the net in Montreal?
You're Locked On Canadiens, your daily podcast on the Montreal Canadiens, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, welcome. It is episode 1133 of Locked On Canadiens. That number does not get any smaller or easier to say. Thanks for making us your first listen of the day and for subscribing on YouTube and wherever you subscribe to podcasts. Doing that supports the show and make sure you don't miss an episode, which is the most important part. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Game time. I am Ian Boisvert, also known as Maybe It's Ian, and I'm joined by the incomparable Laura Sabo, also known as the Active Stick. Laura, holiday weekend, mailbag. Could things be better?
Actually, I got a new car today, so...
Things are so good. We've never been more up than right now.
Absolutely. It feels like the eve of the playoffs. No, honestly, I did. I got a new car, and if you weren't listening until the end of the last episode, which you should be listening to the end of the episodes, because we've got something really fun planned for all our episodes going forward, let's say, like, a couple of weeks from now. I promise you it's fun. But it was a call to the listeners to help me name my car. And I wanted it to be something Habs themed. So my thought was Saku, the Subaru. It's a Subaru Crosstrek that I got. A lot of people had Arbor Jackeye or Jackeye related names. The best one we've received was PK Subaru, which was fantastic. Obviously, my brother-in-law had a pun on my name and said call it the Sabaru, but the suggestions are open. Please let us know what you think I should call my car, and it will be up to the listeners. And so, 10 years from now, when I'm trading the car in and I'm saying what the name is, I can say my podcast listeners named this car.
Man, that's touching. And it'll have another life, and that person will have to keep that name. They cannot change it.
Exactly. So you will live on in the Subaru.
Right. All right. Well, we've got a lot coming up today. Thanks to all of our wonderful listeners who sent in questions. It's 2020 all over again. We are talking about Filip Zadina in Montreal. We are talking about Max Pacioretty again. And we're going to get into our most underrated Montreal Canadiens. But first, I think we should start with some questions pertaining to the news that's been going on. I'll start with Pacioretty because, it's a piece of Toronto news, but we are reclaiming the what about the Leafs aspect of this, and we're making it about ourselves. If you're late to that, that's what we're doing from now on. A couple of people asked about this. Massimo had a question. Also, Pacioretty becoming a Leaf is a real possibility. Thoughts? And he included the puke emoji, so we know what their thoughts are. And Mark Staplecamp also asked Patches and the Maple Leafs thoughts on this. If the Habs are interested and or should be interested, what does the thought of Max Pacioretty putting on the Canadiens jersey again conjure in your mind?
Honestly, it doesn't appeal to me all that much because it is a new era, right?
Yeah.
I wish that he had not been traded. I wish that core had been dealt with very differently. I feel like we would have been looking at very different results on the ice. But that's just hindsight, right? So for me, I've made my peace with Max Pacioretty. I love Max Pacioretty. I thought he did a great job with what little he was given. And with the pressure that he got for being a Montreal Canadiens captain, not speaking French, all of that kind of stuff. Like, I think he did a really great job in Montreal. I think his potential was never realized here, and it was not through any fault of his own. Like, I was very, very fond of that time. But I personally don't feel that right now there's a place for him in this lineup, right? And I get the sort of the leadership aspect, blah, blah, blah. They have leadership on this roster, and bringing back somebody, I think, it's time to move on. It has been time to move on. That's why I argued, I think it was one of your guest episodes actually, that it was time to move on from Brendan Gallagher.
Yeah.
I think it's just a new era. It's a new core. It's a new leadership. It's a new identity. So that's the only reason I wouldn't want him in Montreal. But like, let's say this was a couple of years ago, I would have been like, yes, absolutely, sign me up. But this is different. Like, there's been a lot of changes. There's a new front office. It's a whole new team. However, I still do not want to see him put on a Toronto Maple Leafs jersey because I agree with Massimo there. Puke emoji.
Yeah, I think, we've had a few like long-term-ish Canadians in recent memory, and by recent memory, probably going back the last 15 years or so, leaving the Canadiens and going to the Maple Leafs. It started for me anyway, back with Mike Komisarek when he left in free agency and went there, and holy cow, the Canadiens dodged a bullet that time. And then, Lou making Thomas Plekanec shave his goatee, which was evil. And if this happens, I think it completes the revenge cycle from the Doug Gilmour years. I think that's what we're repaying right now, is the 2 years or so where he was in Montreal and Leaf fans had to deal with that.
Yeah.
A lot, like you mentioned, a lot has changed between now and then. The leadership of this team has changed. It's almost unrecognizable from the years that Pacioretty was here. And Max Pacioretty's health has changed, and not for the better. He's going on his second blown Achilles.
Right.
That's not an easy injury to come back from. He's played in the last 3 years. He's played 91 total games, including just 5 with Carolina in 22-23. I don't think there's much left there from him, which is
much left in the tank.
It seems like his career was taken away from him instead of him being able to retire on his own terms, which you never like to see.
Yeah.
And I completely agree with the idea that this is a different core. Like we need to sit that somewhere else. I'm happy this question was asked, because I feel like every time a player has been brought up since I got here, I'm like, yeah, get him, go get him. That's all. This is a line for me. Like I have no interest in this.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is sad because I just remember, like, we nicknamed him Wolverine, right? Like he would come back, like he dislocated his shoulder and like lost, like he didn't even like miss a game, or he missed like 2 days or something like that. I think, but that's the thing, is that kind of thing always catches up with you. And there's honestly no place. Like if you were to ask me like 5 years from now, should he be joining the front office in some capacity or maybe become a scout or a consultant? I would love that. I would like, but as a player, like there's absolutely no reason to bring him in.
Yeah, and from a Toronto standpoint, because they are linked to bringing him in some capacity, whether it's a 1-year deal or a professional tryout, it kind of reeks of desperation. Like they're trying to pull water from a stone, because their left wing depth is not very good. And Nick Robertson, who would be poised to take a big step forward, at least in responsibility this year, has no intention of like reporting to camp or playing for this team. So,
which is interesting. Like I'm so interested in like how that went so bad, because he was supposed to be better than Cole Caulfield. Remember?
Yeah, we will never forget that. That was a moment in time for these two fan bases where we were arguing that, and it's very clear who came out on top. And unfortunately, it is not Nick Robertson. One more question that
let's do Shane Pinto next. Sorry.
I'm headed to Ottawa right now, funny enough. Logan B asks, really, Ottawa, Nick Cousins, what's the point of that? The point of that to me is that they're the Ottawa Senators and they love dudes that nobody else likes. Yes. And that's sort of the guy Nick Cousins is. Like this year we got so much content around Nick Cousins being a rat. Like Kevin BX is going on national television and calling him a rat. Like it's tough to come back from that, because you're signing a 1-year deal with Ottawa in late August, right? Like it's the most. That's not
sanitizing your reputation in any way.
No, not at all. Not at all.
And Nick Cousins to me is always going to be the guy that, like, when the Montreal Canadiens signed him, like I was depressed about it. And and the thing that's interesting is, like, I just associate him so much with the Philadelphia Flyers and whatever team he's been on, and he's been on quite a few.
He just
whatever team, I know. And this is the one other thing, which is like it's so unlike Ottawa, is that like the people they generally sign have loser energy, and he literally just won a Stanley Cup, but he still has the Philadelphia Flyers we don't like energy, right? Like that's still traveling around with him. But it's just really funny to me that before we started recording, you were like, Ottawa did the most Ottawa thing ever. And it was to sign Nick Cousins. Yeah.
One more from Logan B. Quick answer on this one, because we got to head into our first break here. Is Hughes done cooking until the season starts?
No, absolutely not. He talked about that cap thing, and I think he's got a couple of things he's working on. It's probably not working out, so he's looking for alternatives. He's not done.
Yeah, I think he's got one more move in the tank at least. But I think he's got to figure out the cap situation to get, under the salary cap while Carey Price is still on the active roster instead of injured reserve, so that they can continue to build up cap space. They don't love to be on off-season IR, it really straps them when it comes to how things go during the season. Great. Well, up next, we're going to figure out what's going on with Filip Zadina and potentially coming to Montreal. And we're going to get into that in just a moment. You've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Well, we have something a little different for you. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then, with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel at any time. Just visit fanduel.com/lockedon to download America's #1 sportsbook. And we are back. First of all, before we get into the rest of our mailbag questions, I want to thank you for making Locked On Canadiens your first listen of the day. For your second listen of the day, head on over to Locked On NHL. The Locked On NHL podcast provides you with a national perspective on all things NHL each and every day, with national experts and local insight on every team in the league. Available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Laura, for some reason, we are talking about Filip Zadina in the year of our gourd 2024. Apparently,
he's
please.
a thing. He's still a thing, right? I think it's really interesting that this conversation is still going on, because if I'm Filip Zadina or a fan of Filip Zadina, I'm thinking, how did it all go so wrong?
Yeah, I mean, he's gonna end up on his third team in as many years. He terminated his deal out of Detroit because he wanted a better opportunity. He lit money on fire to try to find another way to stay in the NHL. Massimo asks this. Apparently, Montreal are one of 3 teams showing interest in Zadina. What do you think of that? Can Marty St. Louis save him too? And Mark Staplecamp also had this. Okay, I'll ask it as everyone else will. Zadina, where will he fit into the Habs lineup if signed? This all comes from a report from Pavel Barda, a Czech reporter. They originally said that Zadina was signing a PTO in Buffalo. Apparently, Zadina's agent, Darren Ferris, quickly squashed that rumor. And it seems now there's 3 teams interested: Colorado, Toronto, and Montreal. We know Toronto's looking for left wing. He's a left-hand shot. It makes a lot of sense for them. Do you think there's anything left here for Filip Zadina? It seems like we're on his 8th last chance. Like, I just feel like he's been around forever and nothing's happened.
This is the thing. Like, I feel like with him, he hasn't explicitly outright done anything wrong, right?
Yeah.
And it's just not worked out for him. And I get the whole, like, he wanted to, create opportunities for himself. But this is a very different caliber player than, some of the other guys we see saying they don't want to report, or they want to switch teams, et cetera, et cetera. Like, I feel like he didn't give himself enough of a chance.
Yeah.
And he ended up screwing himself over. Should Montreal take a chance on him? I think if it's cheap, if it's low risk or no risk, like Marty St. Louis can get something out of that, right? He can pull something out of that. But I think his what do you call it? Like his cachet is not there anymore. His value is at the lowest it's going to be until he can prove himself and come back.
Yeah, 91 points in 262 career NHL games. He's, like I said, heading on to his 3rd NHL team in as many seasons. He only had 23 points last year, despite being given a pretty good opportunity in San Jose. Look, I'm kind of thankful that we have another guy on here that I can say no to, because I've been saying yes to everybody who is linked to this team. I just don't know what value there is to having a guy like him on the team. If he's going to provide us 23 points, is there not somebody else who can do that?
Yeah.
And Massimo, the part of their question, can Marty St. Louis save him? I don't know that this is going to work on every player that comes to Montreal, but I love that, that's the mentality that this fan base has about this coach. Like, Marty can save them.
Yes.
I don't know that's going to work every time, because there's one guy Marty tried to save this year, and it's Josh Anderson, and it has not worked.
It did not work.
Right. So I don't know that that's going to be a reality for the Montreal Canadiens. Do you think he fits on either of those other teams, Colorado or Toronto?
I feel like maybe in Toronto, but definitely not Colorado. Like Colorado is very big on high value for low risk.
Yeah.
And he's kind of the opposite at the moment. It's a high risk proposition, right? And they're still in their window. They're very firmly in their window. So I don't think that he's necessarily what they're looking for.
Yeah. And Mark, part of his question asks, where would Zadina fit into the Habs lineup if signed? I just don't know that he does. Like, it's a square peg in a round hole. I don't see it, because I don't even know that he's carved out like a prototype for himself. Like, what kind of player is Filip Zadina? I have no idea. And it's kind of bad that, a guy that we were considering taking third overall back in the 2019 draft.
Was it the Kotkaniemi draft, right?
Right. So either way, we were not getting a great value with that third pick.
Yeah.
And Brady Tkachuk was right there, and it would be really fun to be able to have him on our team instead of on a divisional rival, and not draft Jesperi Kotkaniemi or Filip Zadina. But them's the breaks. These things happen at the entry draft. Jeff the Red asks, what are some good nicknames for your projected forward lines this season? And I'll jump to DF Pendry's first question, because they asked, should the line A is on be the line A line, the Patrick line, or something else? Did you see how I had to slow down to read that, because it reads like a tongue twister?
It is absolutely a tongue twister. So I wanted to call that line the second line A.
The second line A, yeah.
Yeah. Like it's a second chance, right?
Yeah.
He's going to be on that line until proving himself otherwise. So I like second line A.
Yeah, I think the first line, I really love thinking of that as the "we told you so" line, because last season, from the beginning, well, not from the beginning, because Slavkovsky looked great next to Doc and Newhook in the brief time we saw them together. And then the second Newhook moved to center and they pulled up Anderson on that line, it just didn't work. Not for a second did that line work. And the entire time, the majority of us Canadiens fans were begging, pleading, screaming to put Slavkovsky with Cole Caulfield and Nick Suzuki. And the second they did it for an extended period of time, they will not look back from it. So, like, to me, that's the "we told you so" line. We were right. It's very rare that we are right about coaching decisions as a fan base, but we nailed that one.
Absolutely. And I think for that one, like, "we told you so" is really good. But I also wanted to, I don't think that right now I know who the bottom six is going to be. Like, we were talking about, like, the projected lineup, right? I don't know. Like, where are they going to put Josh Anderson? Is he still going to be on this team? Like, what happens to Christian Dvorak? A lot of people said that he fulfills the third line center requirements that we talked about in our last episode. I really like that idea, but is he going to play on the third line, or is he going to be shipped off somewhere, right? So I don't know what the bottom two looks like, but when there is like an actual lineup, when they start doing the practice lines and everything, we will come up with nicknames for those lines for our listeners.
Yeah. And I think, moving this idea to defensemen, we talked about in our last episode, pairings we wanted to see. I said Savard and Hudson is one I really want to see. Father and Hudson makes a lot of sense. Right?
I like that.
That's a dad and his kid just out there for a skate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
that'll be a lot of fun. We will, once we have the lines and we kind of, get an idea of what Marty is looking at, we will be able to put some of these together. And if you guys have ideas, leave them in the comments, tweet them at LO_Canadiens. You guys can help us out with that. Maybe we'll rate them at some point as the season gets going. One more from DF Pendry's before we hit to break. Who should start in Laval no matter what?
Oh, that's interesting. We said Reinbacher because we want him to play in Laval the whole year.
Correct.
I think, honestly, anyone else, I would think they have a shot at earning a spot from, Hudson, Mayu, Sean Farrell, like anyone that has been. So, like, for me, like, Reinbacher is the only one where I'm absolutely sure on that.
Mm-hmm.
And then I can't think of, like, who's a long shot that you want to see on the NHL. I think they all have an opportunity to earn the spot.
Yeah, I might throw Owen Beck into that conversation just so he can get some pro reps, right? I might throw Philip Machar into that conversation just because I remember last preseason, just looking at him play and being like, man, that is one of the smallest players I've ever seen. And I don't think he is, but he looked like a boy out there. Like it was difficult to like look at him and see an NHL player.
He played small.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Like Cole Caulfield is small, but like you don't notice that he's that small a lot of the time because he's finding his way into very dangerous areas of the ice.
Yeah.
Phil Mayshard, we haven't gotten a really good look at. I think he's in need of just a good opportunity. It seems like his OHL career didn't really go the way that he thought it would. So those are two guys to me that keep him in Laval to start. Owen Beck might force his way onto this roster before too long, just because Christian Dvorak is probably on his way out at some point this year as trade bait. It seems like Owen Beck could slide up into the bottom two lines pretty easily.
Yeah, for sure. And that was the thing, because I didn't want to put him in the conversation because I thought he might grab a spot for himself out of camp.
Right. All right. Well, in our last segment, we're going to wrap up our mailbag, which includes our most underrated Montreal Canadiens, and we will get into that in just a moment. If you're like me, you love being in the middle of the action, whether it's taking in a concert or enjoying the night at the ballpark. It's just more fun being there. I mentioned this before, but last summer I got to see Shohei Ohtani up close and personal, and that's something I'm going to remember forever. The place where you can go to get the tickets you want is Gametime. We're big fans of Gametime here. Thanks to their all-in pricing. This is a setting on the app that you can toggle on so that Gametime tells you exactly how much you're paying to get into the game. No hidden fees. Plus, with their seat views, you know what kind of action you'll be able to see. And with their lowest price guarantee, you know you're getting the best deal for your tickets. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? It's game time. All right. Last segment, and then we are off into the holiday weekend. We've got a couple more questions to get to. I want to finish off. DF Pendries always sends in very thoughtful questions, and they are little rapid fire groupings. So I like to sprinkle them through the show so that we get a little bit of fun the entire way. If an evil magician casts a curse forcing the Canadiens to switch cities with another team for 1 year, which city should they choose? So if we're reading this right, switch cities with any other team. So it has to be a pre-existing NHL city.
And then that team comes here.
I didn't even consider that. What team do you want to watch in your backyard?
Oh, Colorado for sure.
Yeah.
Colorado. I think Vancouver is going to be fun this year. I still think, but they're definitely the number one team. I don't want it to be the Toronto Maple Leafs. Like, I don't want to watch, disappointment over and over again. Absolutely no to Ottawa. Like zero interest in that. Nashville is going to be really fun. So maybe Nashville would be cool, because then I could go to Nashville, to a fun city, to see my team. And then people from Nashville can come to a fun city to see their team, but also the team in my backyard is going to be really fun to watch.
Yeah, I love the Colorado answer because it means that Artturi Lehkonen gets to come back and be a local hero again. And every time he leaves the Bell Center, it will be on the shoulders of fans.
Yes.
So like that I love so much. Sheesh. I think maybe Dallas. I really like the Dallas Stars roster. Jason Robertson's like one of the most underrated stars in the league, in my opinion. Like he's dynamite. I love watching him play. And I think Wyatt Johnston had a big coming out party this year in the playoffs. Like Dallas to me would be cool. It would also make sense for the Canadiens to go play in Dallas because for some reason we keep playing country roads at the Bell Center and people love it. So put them in a place that's a little more country than Montreal.
I think it would be funny. Also, it'd be really funny to go from one of the coldest cities, not the coldest city, but one of the coldest cities, to like objectively the hottest city in the league.
Yeah.
Well, Las Vegas. I don't know.
I might send them to Florida just so they don't have state income tax for a year. So all of those boys can take home more of their paycheck. I think they would appreciate
that question.
Yeah. All right. George Russell Jr. asks, I'm usually that cup half full guy when it comes to the Habs, and this season is no different. I'm expecting the boys to make the playoffs, and I believe they will do it on the strength of guys like Kirby Dach taking a big step forward. So this leads to my question. Considering Dach is sort of in the shadows and underrated from only playing a couple of games last season, who do you guys see as the most underrated player on the current roster? I'll let you start this one off. What do you got?
That's a tough one because I think it's Mike Matheson, but I think it's because the fans don't like him enough.
That was my answer. I think that he does not get enough play across the league for the kind of defenseman that he is.
I think everyone's always in a rush to trade him. Everyone's always complaining about his mistake. It's like it's Jeff Petrie all over again.
Yeah, and I don't get it. Like, I understand maybe he doesn't fit into the long-term plan of this team, but he fits into the plan right now.
Yeah.
Right? Like, and he's a defenseman who's not going to be easy to replace. Yes, maybe eventually Lane Hudson becomes that guy, but Lane Hudson's also much smaller than Mike Matheson. And Mike Matheson plays a pretty physical game when he wants to. He throws some pretty devastating hits from time to time. So I love the Mike Matheson answer just because I have a T-shirt that I made called that says Petrie for Norris on it, and I think I need to get it changed to Matheson for Norris.
Yeah,
because I've transferred my irrational love from Petrie to Matheson almost seamlessly.
I don't even like for me, like I loved Petrie like irrationally. Like with Mike Matheson, I'm not there yet. But I feel like with all the comments and stuff, I will get there, right? It'll be like spite love. I don't think that he gets enough credit. And I think that people are just always like, they talk about him like he doesn't belong on this team. They talk about him like he needs to be traded. They talk about him like he's bad. He's not. He's fantastic. He's honestly, he's like one of the better defensemen the Canadiens have to offer right now. And I know that's not always going to be the case. And I know there's like 100% going to come a day in the very near future that he doesn't belong here anymore. But that time is like you said, Ian, that time is not now. Time is not now. Since he has been on this team, he has done nothing but bring positive things.
You know why I think a lot of fans have a bad taste in their mouth when it comes to Mike Matheson?
Is it because he used to be a Penguin?
Maybe that. But do you remember like the first memory that we have of Mike Matheson in a Canadiens uniform?
Yeah, it was when he was tweeting.
Correct. He tweeted, "Guess who?" with eyeballs, and everyone was like, "Cole Caulfield extension," and then it was like, "Sorry, it's just Mike Matheson." Like, I feel like our brains are trained to be disappointed when it comes to Mike Matheson. So, like, that's just a very tinfoil hat take, but I feel like there's got to be some truth to it because the irrational feelings that people have towards Mike Matheson, like just running him out of this town. No, despite him coming in and being a model Montreal Canadian, like I
absolutely,
it doesn't make any sense.
Like with everything, like literally, like he like embraces. I mean, he's from the city, obviously, but like he played like the local player. Like he embraced it. He took on that role, and like what more could we ask of him? Like on this porous defense, like what more could we possibly ask for of him to make him a valuable player? So for me, like he's like hands down the most underrated player on this team.
Yeah, and to George's point about Kirby Dach, I think that's another phenomenal answer because I think he's underrated in the sense that, we don't really know what kind of player he is at this point in his career. Like we're all expecting a big step forward, but like so much of this team's, potential hinges on him having a big year this year and staying healthy. It's two really, big, cogs in the machine. I'd like to believe that if he stays healthy, he is that 65, 70 point player that we think he is. But until it happens, like, I'm not going to pretend that we like that. Yep. That's taken care of. We have a 70-point second line center.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It's not a sure thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the price to acquire him was great. I just wish we've seen more of him over the last 2 years. And I feel Kirby Dach probably has the same wish. I don't think he wanted to sit out, 81 and a half games last year. So yeah, that's Kirby Dach's also a really good answer there.
Yeah, I think so. Is that it for the mailbag questions?
That is it for the mailbag. I did have one more thing that I wanted to get into. Out of the KHL, it seems like Ivan Demidov is going to start with SKA. So I think we can all calm down about, him not playing this year and him coming to Montreal. I think that's the final nail in the coffin. He's playing in the KHL this year.
But also hopefully he's getting a lot of ice time, with like the KHL preseason. He was fantastic. He was phenomenal. and I don't think he's going to be the 13th forward. So
no, I think his coach came out and said that he's going to play in game 1. So I think what he did in these last few games, I think he's playing, they were playing like the young guns against KHL teams. I think what he did in those last few games forced his coach's hand.
Yeah.
Which is what you want to see a player like him do at his age. He's not going to step into that league and dominate it, but he's kicking open a door for himself. I really love the attitude that he's attacked training camp with. Like, oh, I'm the 13th forward. Nah.
No, I'm not. No, I'm not.
Yeah.
It's like the same thing as when he was talking like Canadians. They're crazy if they don't take him at 5.
Yeah. Oh, that man, when he's holding the cup above his head, that clip's going to go so hard.
Yeah.
All right. I think that's going to do it for us on this episode of Locked On Canadiens. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thanks for making us your first listen of the day. For your second listen, head on over to Locked On NHL to see what else is going on around the league. As a reminder, we are free and available everywhere you get your podcasts, including YouTube. So be sure to subscribe to Locked On Canadiens so you don't miss an episode. We are also on Instagram. Go follow us on Instagram. Do it. You can follow the show on Twitter at LO_Canadiens or email us at lockedoncanadiens@gmail.com. You can find Laura at The Active Stick. You can find me at Maybe It's Ian. Thanks for tuning in. We will see you next time.